Who is the most overrated person in history? Tutankhamun. He was a boy pharaoh that only reached the age of maybe 18, born from incest and suffered scoliosis, a bad foot, walked with a cane, and contracted malaria, and likely died from an infection from a broken leg. Also, when he came to power, married his sister and had 2 miscarriages. This poor boy had lots of power, but was sick all his life, and likely his advisors made all decisions for him and eventually succeeded him. Also had a very short reign that ended with Egypt at war. Jack the Ripper. More overhyped, not overrated, but he only killed 5 people. It's not like he's the original Dexter. Yeah, I really hate this story. Overtold, over-theorized. Only reason no one has pinpointed him was because it was in 1888, before crime investigation matured and they didn't have the technology. Beyonce. Her host, the wife of the owner of the Warriors, leans over her to ask Jay-Z what he wants to drink. People see it, harass the woman to no end, and make it into a power moment for Beyonce. Don't get me wrong, she's a great artist, but people act like she's a god. Coco Chanel. I have recently found out she was apparently a Nazi agent who went under the code name Westminster. She spent most of World War II in Paris in the Ritz, sleeping with Nazi officers, and had direct contact to Himmler and Goebbels. She even insisted all Jewish directors of her brand be removed. Mother Teresa. I think the world is being much helped by the suffering of the poor people. Mother Teresa. She earned billions and flew around in private jets, all the while torturing ill or dying patients. She called her medical facilities houses of the dying, and they were exactly that. She didn't isolate patients with highly infectious diseases. She basically glorified her patients' suffering instead of treating it, withholding painkillers, so patients were left in agony. Used syringes were rinsed with water and reused. This was in 1991, and the Catholic Church made her a fucking saint. Waldo. Why should anyone even care to search for him? He's done nothing. The fact that he's always hiding is probably because he's done something wrong. Plus, that fucker only has 1 shirt. Ioannis Metaxas. He was the leader of Greece from 1936 to 1941, most famous for not surrendering to fascist Italy during World War II. The only problem is that Metaxas was a fascist dictator himself. Thomas Alva Edison, an absolute douche that is remembered for things he never did. Ted Bundy. People claim that in terms of serial killers, he had high intelligence. He didn't. He dropped out of law school because he couldn't keep up with his peers. So he was of average intelligence. He's just being compared with other serial killers who overall skew lower in terms of IQ. And no, his crimes weren't clever. He broke into the basement of a sorority house and bludgeoned 2 girls to death with a log from the fireplace while they were sleeping. The only reason he wasn't caught sooner was because the detectives working on the case were idiots and ignored multiple credible reports from Bundy's ex-wife. Stop romanticizing the guy. Outside of how nasty it is to hype up freaking serial killers, he, like all serial killers, was a gigantic turd sandwich. He wasn't smart, and his crimes weren't elegant or super planned out 4D chess murders. Don't believe the stupid dumb Netflix movie. Oh, and he admitted that after he tossed the bodies into a field because they were too badly decomposed to keep them in his house, he'd still go out there and sleep with them despite the fact that they were rotting and likely full of maggots. Paul Revere. He was much less important in the Revolutionary War than most people think. There are more obscure patriots from his time that did more for America than him. Overall, one of those people who isn't bad, but gets way too much credit. King Arthur. Strange women lying in ponds distributing swords is no basis for a system of government. Supreme executive power derives from a mandate from the masses, not from some farcical aquatic ceremony. Ronald Reagan. He was always a popular president, but he has since been recast, mainly by conservative historians, as a great one as well. Yes, you can easily place him on that pedestal. You would merely need to ignore the Iran-Contra scandal, the huge budget deficits, his environment ignorance, his do-nothing reaction to the looming AIDS epidemic, his courting of Saddam Hussein, and numerous other blunders. And he didn't win the Cold War. The war in Afghanistan started in 1979. Reagan was still in California. Stalin, literally a mass murder, still hailed to this day by a majority of Russians and many, many other dumbass communists around the world. Henry VIII. Let's be honest, all he did was strong-arm the church so he could marry another woman. Charles de Gaulle. Dude was an officer of the army that lost half of France in 2 weeks to the Germans in World War II, flees like a cockroach to the UK, where somehow embodies the spirit of the resistance, somehow receives the title of general, even though his tasks were not dangerous nor fundamental. When the Allies take over France, he is not in any of the strategic discussions among generals of different armies. Nonetheless, he walks into Paris as their great liberator. A couple of years later gets elected president because somehow he has managed to keep his popularity. While president, North African colonies declare war and independence from France. Many people die, and the French economy and territories takes a huge blow. Also, he managed to dismantle the oldest European university of the world, Université de Paris. But no, his name is on an airport, many avenues and countless plazas across France. Douglas MacArthur was obsessed with his legacy while being a far less capable leader than many of the other overlooked commanders in the Pacific Theater. He spent thousands of lives in battles on islands that had little strategic significance, declared the battle for the Philippines over while intense fighting raged on, and was disliked by many serving under him. Hitler, hear me out. National Socialism and anti-Semitism was not something he invented, and I am pretty sure that if it wasn't for him, somebody else like Goebbels or Hess would have become German dictator. When people say, oh, if only Hitler wasn't born, then World War II or the Shoah would not have happened. That's utter bullshit. I wish while teaching about the Holocaust, people would put it into context. The climate of polarization in the 1920s in Germany is very similar to what is going on now in the USA. People were and are seeking out extremists with conspiracy theories to follow because they look for scapegoats. The man on the top is just a symptom for a systemic problem which lies much deeper. Not in all history, but Chris McCandless was a fucking moron who does not deserve to be romanticized. Against all advice, he strolled out into the Alaskan wilderness with no idea what he was doing, with no map, underprepared, undersupplied, and with no research into seasonal dangers, smashed up some cabins, shot a moose. Despite not being able to preserve or store the meat, thought he could teach himself to identify edible wild mushrooms. Didn't look beyond the river crossing he initially used, where he would have found a hand-operated cable car half a mile away and died, probably from eating strange seeds, in an abandoned bus on a known hunting trail. He was not pioneering or inspiring. He was fucking stupid, and somehow this inspires people. Gandhi. He didn't really win India freedom. World War II did. His support of the Khilafat movement gave a big boost to Muslim separatism in India. His agreement to partition resulted in 1 million deaths. His idea of self-sufficient villages resulted in India continuing to remain poor and backward and failing to industrialize. His promotion of Nehru over far more competent leaders in the Congress. I'm tempted to say Obama. I'm not American, but if I was, I would have voted for him both times. But he still bombed places and turned his back on whistleblowers. People act like he was a hero for some reason, whereas he was just another politician to me. He projected more class than most of them, but that was about it. Amelia Earhart. There were plenty of trailblazing and better women pilots, yet Amelia is a household name because she attempted something she died while trying. Elon Musk. Everyone is praising him for being a great inventor and whatnot, but nobody sees the workers' environments, and there's also this rumors about an unethical emerald mine. Billionaires do not get rich out of kindness. Sun Tzu. I have been reading Art of War, and my God, it's full of useful strategies. Half of the strategies and tips are essentially, it is harder to fight at night because it is dark, or feed your soldiers so a soldier won't die from starvation. Also, half of the 150-page book is just different general commenting on the strategies and philosophies. I'm just here for some quotes, not to really learn anything. John F. Kennedy. He is considered to be one of the best presidents, but during his presidency, he didn't accomplish a lot. Maybe that's because his term was relatively short, but anyway, he is in the history mainly because of his death. Henry Ford. In business, engineering, and manufacturing, he's revered like a god. Professors like to gloss over his overwhelming anti-Semitism. Ford wrote and published a wildly anti-Semitic newspaper, which were spread around the Ford Motors facilities. Those papers were republished in Germany and became incredibly popular with the Third Reich. Heinrich Himmler described Ford as one of our most valuable, important, and witty fighters. Hitler praised Ford in Mein Kampf and referred to Ford as an inspiration. The admiration went both ways, because Ford was a Nazi sympathizer to the highest degree, hosting Hitler's representatives in his home and hobnobbing with Nazi officers. On his 75th birthday, he was awarded the Grand Cross of the German Eagle. the highest medal Nazi Germany could bestow on an American. But all anyone cares about are his assembly lines, which he didn't even invent.